it's a Sunday, and I get a call from John. He says, "Do me a favor, go get your friend Tommy, or go get your friend Blinky." Everybody had a nickname for Tommy, Blinky. Tommy had a nervous twitch, so he says, "Go get your friend. I'm in Gino's Pizzeria in Long Beach." So I said, "Okay, see you in 30." Now I knew Tommy was going out to dinner. I knew Tommy had a whole thing. So I go to Tom. Tommy has a house in Lido Beach, beautiful home. And I go there, ring the bell, and his wife answers the door, Frances. Now you got to remember, Frances was Three Fingers Brown's daughter of the Lucchese family. Imagine that wedding, Jesse.
Yeah.
Carlo and Lucchese. That was some wedding. So
yeah,
I ring the bell, and Frances answers the door. And, she turns white because they're all dressed, ready to go out. Tommy's ready to go. So I says, "Tom, you got to take a ride with me. We got to go meet John at Gino's Pizzeria." Now, I already knew, I had a thing in my head what was going on, because Tommy and I had a conversation Friday. Somebody on the west side, which is the west side that's the Genovese side, went into one of Tommy's accounts in the garment center and Consolidated Trucking. So Tommy went to meet with somebody on the west side, but John had a policy. You can't meet with other members of other families without going to John, without going to the boss or the underboss first for permission. So when Tommy was telling me the story, I said, "Tom, far be it from me. This is your life, but don't you think you should post the boss?" That was an expression, post the boss. So Lewis said, "I'm going to be there 20 minutes. It's never," I said, "he finds out everything. I'm telling you, it's going to be a problem if he finds out." He's not going to find out. He says, it's in and out. Okay, do what you want. So when I go to the door and I see Tommy's a little undone, I says, "What's going on?" He says to me, "What's going on?" I says, "He's at Gino's Pizza in Long Beach. He just wants to see you for a few minutes." I said, "But I'm telling you, I know what it's about." I says, "It's when you went to meet those people on the west side." He says, "How would he find out?" I says, "Tom, he finds out everything." So we walk in there, and he didn't excuse me from the table. So he couldn't have been that mad, because if he was going to be mad, he would have excused me from the table to reprimand Tommy Gambino, because after all, Tommy is who he was, a captain, and also the son of Carlo Gambino.
Right.
So we sit down, and he says to Tom, "I thought we have a policy. There's a policy in this family. You're not supposed to meet with anybody from another family without posting me." So I says, "John, with respect," I says, "there was an account I was trying to get," and I lied to John. "There was an account I was trying to get in the garment center, and I didn't really want to bother you with it." So he just looked at me with that smile and that grin. He said, "Oh, is that what it was about?" I said, "Yeah." I says, I asked him to get me this account, and that's what he did. I says, and it was, like you always said, I don't want to bother you with all this, nonsensical, bullshit stuff. He says, "Lewis, it's not bullshit. It's not bullshit. That's the policy that I have." I said, "All right, well, then I apologize." I says, because I thought, because Tommy and I, we were together every day, 5-6 days a week. And, I figured, if anybody knows, it's Tommy. So he says, no problem. So he says to Tommy, looks at Tommy, says, Tommy, in the future, just so you know, I appreciate you getting us the account, but in the future, just let me know. So that was it. He says, I said, he said, "I drive Tommy back to his house because I see he's all dressed and ready to go out, and come back here and we'll have some food." I said, "All right." And John was alone. He drove himself to Long Beach. Normally he would have asked, at that point, he would have asked Carmine Agnello, or he would have asked me, or he would have asked Junior. But I guess he just wanted to be alone. So I dropped Tommy back off. So I get out of the car, I walk in the door, he gives me a big hug. I said, "Listen, I don't know if you believe this or not, but, just so you know, you can't, I'm telling you, you should be telling me." So I go back to Gino's Pizza. I walk in. He says to me, "That was a hell of a story you made up. You're protecting your friend?" He said, "What's the name of the account?" So I confessed. I said, "You're right." I didn't want you to rip him a new asshole. I didn't want the guy is going out. The guy shakes every time you walk into the office. Every time he comes to the garment, I says, just forget it. He did the wrong thing. The guy's 100% loyal for you. He'll do anything we ask him. Just forget it. So he says, all right. He says, it's forgotten. So, that was one thing. He wouldn't have done that for anybody else. Anybody else would have got their head severed.
Yeah.
Or would have had their house blown up. But that's a good Tommy Gambino, Lewis Kasman story that I just told you. And it's 100% true. Junior knows the story because when I saw Junior that Monday or Tuesday, he says, you had my father laughing. He says, but he said, he said, you stuck up for Tommy. He said, you're with the guy every day. I said, yeah. Well, I didn't want to see Tommy get opened up by Grandpa. There was no reason for it. So that's a good Tommy Gambino story. But you weren't tricking John. As soon as I got back, he says to me, that's a hell of a story. But listen, Tommy Gambino and it was that, he needed me for certain things and I needed him for certain things. And we wound up having a pretty good, repertoire. So,
right.
And that's really what John wanted, because he always used to tell me, Lewis, if I'm not here, you always have Tommy Gambino, and so that's that story.
And you said, in later on that John and Tommy actually became really close and would, cook out and stuff together. Is that right?
We had many barbecues at Tommy's house with John and other captains, which would be there. And Tommy was very, very helpful to John because Tommy was a very smart man, money-wise, and he was very smart when it came to the mafia. So, he was a big. Unfortunately, it didn't happen sooner, but he was a big asset to John, unbeknownst to a lot of other captains and unbeknownst to other people, because a lot of the other captains were very jealous of Tommy Gambino.
Yeah,
they were all jealous of each other. They hug and kiss. How are you? How's the kids? How's the family? And then behind your back, that fucking cocksucker, that motherfucker. That's all the way they all were.